This week at the zoo, the Nasdaq and S&P 500 indexes gained about 4% amidst, shall we say, mixed signals on the prospect of a federal stimulus deal. Seriously, what the hell is even going on? Hello and welcome back to the Wall Street Petting Zoo. This is our This Week at the Zoo segment in which we review the previous week's market news and look ahead to the coming week. I'm Christopher Smith.
And I'm Robert Coburn. What the hell is going on indeed, Chris? On Tuesday this week, Donald Trump tweeted that he had ordered his staff to stop negotiating with congressional Democrats on a new stimulus deal, saying there wouldn't be a new deal until after the election. Speculation ran wild as to what was going through Trump's head when he sent this tweet, not only depriving himself of an economic win, but also publicly taking all the blame upon himself. His staff seemed to think it was self-sabotage, like when you finally landed your dream girlfriend, but you don't actually believe you deserve her. So you stop taking showers because you subconsciously want her to break up with you and put you out of your misery. By the end of the day, Trump had walked it all back, and he was furiously tweeting at Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell to pass an airline bailout immediately. He's ready to sign. Unfortunately, everybody else involved in the negotiations seems just as confused as Trump. On Friday, in the space of just 1 hour, Larry Kudlow said a deal had been approved. Mitch McConnell said there would be no deal before the election, and Nancy Pelosi said a deal was still under negotiation. So we can assure you listeners this week that a stimulus bill will be signed, unless it isn't, in which case it won't. We hope that clears things up for you.
Yeah, in other news this week, AMC theaters are considering shutting down again through the end of the year, both because of a new spike in COVID-19 cases and because Hollywood studios have postponed most of the major movie releases this year, including the new James Bond movie. Apparently, filmmakers have decided it's no time to die just to see a movie. See what I did there? No time to die. But unfortunately, what saves the lives of moviegoers may spell doom and death for the industry. Cineworld, which owns the Regal theaters, has closed indefinitely and laid off 45,000 employees. And AMC theaters may be next. I just hope that when Hollywood is finally ready to release these movies, there is still somewhere left to show them.
The other big story of the week was that House Democrats published a report calling for the breakup of big technology conglomerates like Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. The Democrats currently have a 65% chance of gaining control of the entire U.S. government next year, and if they do, then they might take the opportunity to take antitrust action against some of these monopolistic technology firms. Big tech would also be the market segment most impacted by Joe Biden's proposed corporation tax hike, so there may be some rough times ahead for these companies in the event of a Democratic election sweep. Could it be time to start looking at rotating from growth to value and from large caps to small and mid cap stocks?
And there were several warning signs in this week's economic data. The JOLTS job openings report showed that job openings fell in August for the first time since April. The trade deficit in August reached its worst level in 14 years, although both imports and exports rose for the month. Imports just rose faster than exports. Boeing slashed its forecast for future aircraft demand by 11%. And S&P Global forecasted that the corporate default rate will double next year to 12.5%. PMI reports for the U.S. services sector showed overall growth in September, but the growth rate slowed from August, which had already slowed from the previous month. And a lot of the growth was in housing, healthcare, and business services, while consumer-facing services actually shrank for the month amidst rising COVID cases and contracting credit. U.S. credit card balances fell over $7 billion in August, partly because banks are pulling people's credit lines as they lose their incomes. Weekly jobless claims this week missed analyst estimates, coming in at 840,000 initial claims, although continuing claims posted another big drop of about a million jobs. So to me, it feels like the economy may be at an inflection point, ready to turn downward if we don't soon get a new stimulus bill. The market right now is trading higher on hope of stimulus, and it's ignoring this economic data. But a failure of stimulus talks could bring reality crashing in like the Kool-Aid Man.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk stocks we watched last week. What were you watching, Chris?
Well, last week I watched Gold, Hewlett Packard Enterprise, and Altria. I was predicting that the dollar would be down this week and gold would be up, and indeed that is what happened. Gold gained about 1.5%. Hewlett Packard Enterprise gained about 4%, and my best performer of the week was Altria, which gained nearly 4.5%. So overall, a really good week for me, but roughly in line with the weekly return of the Nasdaq index. So it's not like I'm blowing away the market here, but pretty good week overall. What were you watching, Robert?
So, this last week I was watching WWE, and it ended slightly lower than the start of the week, but it seems that the $40 mark will be where WWE stock price will hover around until they approach the quarterly earnings report at the end of October. Unless there is a major story that breaks, as there are murmurs on Twitter of WWE talent unionizing. WWE management has recently informed talent they can no longer use platforms like Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, and Cameo under the umbrella term third party platforms, in which some talent has been making a significant amount of income. WWE sees this income as an opportunity to force talent to make them money, which obviously is not sitting well with the talent. I actually hope they unionize even if it hurts the stock price, but I believe that even if it does hurt the stock price, longer term, if the talent is happier, the end product may end up improving as a result, which would be a boon on the stock price. So now let me tag in Chris with the stocks we are watching this coming week.
Yeah, I am watching the S&P 500 because we are nearing some really key resistance levels. We're headed back toward the all-time high. Depending what happens with stimulus talks, I see one of three things happening. In the bearish scenario, where stimulus talks come to an abrupt end within the next few days, I would expect the S&P 500 to top just 0.5% above its current price, where there's a significant resistance level, before turning sharply down. That would mean that the S&P 500 had made a lower high, which would be bearish for the market overall going forward. If talks drag on a little bit longer, but still end in failure, I think we'll see a top about 3% above the current price. In the, I think, unlikely event that a substantial deal actually gets successfully signed, I would expect the S&P 500 to continue upward to make new highs. So basically, I don't believe there's a lot of upside left in these indexes without a new stimulus deal. I would be really surprised to see the S&P 500 break through its all-time high 3% above the current price without a new stimulus deal being signed. What are you watching next week, Robert?
So this week I will be watching marijuana stocks. So the last couple of years it seems that marijuana stocks have been high on their own supply, with cannabis stocks with cannabis oversaturating the market. Many companies have been sitting on a huge surplus, which has not done well for companies like Aurora and Canopy Growth. However, cannabis stocks saw a small bump on Thursday as VP candidate Kamala Harris, who stated they will decriminalize marijuana during the famous Fly on a Pence VP debate. Additionally, Marijuana Business Daily reported that France will be conducting an experiment in which up to 3,000 patients will be given free cannabis products for 2 years, starting in March. However, the French Parliament has still yet to approve the budget for it, so there is still the possibility that this experiment either doesn't happen or is reduced in scope. Despite these being good signs from the industry, there are already 24 states in the US that have legalized and or decriminalized cannabis, with only 8 states not even allowing it medically. Decriminalizing it federally would help cannabis companies function more like a normal company in that they could actually use banks to store all their income, as banks are federally regulated. Thus, they usually keep all their cash in a safe where federal investigators are known to raid, taking all the cash and not reporting it accurately. Overall, I think that hype influences this industry a lot, as cannabis stocks were a hot market 5 or 6 years ago. If it were decriminalized, it would definitely cause the stock prices to spike upward, but until the companies mature and the market is no longer saturated, I don't think cannabis stocks are something to look at long term, but definitely a good short term play for this upcoming election.
Well, folks, that's our episode for today. If you heard anything that was useful to you on the podcast, please consider giving us a like, share, or comment on YouTube. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook and on Twitter, and I post news updates throughout the week on Twitter, so you can find regular updates there. You can also get our weekly episodes direct to your social media feed. We'd really appreciate if you would share the podcast with your friends on social media. We don't do any paid advertising for the show, so word of mouth is the only way that we get the word out, and we really appreciate your support. If you'd like to support the podcast financially, we have a referral link to Webull underneath the YouTube video. If you open a Webull account and deposit $100, you get a couple free stocks. We will also get a couple free stocks, and that helps support the podcast. We really appreciate your support. Thanks so much for listening, and we will see you back at the zoo next week.
See ya.